Close your eyes for a moment. Let the room settle. The lights are low, the air is soft, and the night is wrapping itself around you like a warm blanket. Tonight, I want to take you somewhere, far back in time, to a land where the stars watched over deserts, temples, and rivers that whispered secrets. Ancient Egypt. Yes, the same place that gave us towering pyramids and quiet, wrapped-up mummies. But tonight, we're not talking about pharaohs or curses. Tonight, we're slipping into the surprisingly dreamy, mind-bending side of Egypt's story. Because these people, they knew how to celebrate. Not just with dancing and music, but with long, glowing nights that might just rival your college roommate's wildest weekend. Before we go any deeper, if you find comfort in these quiet little adventures we take together, you can gently tap that like button. And maybe subscribe, but only if it feels right. I'd love for you to drop a comment too. Maybe tell me where you're watching from and what time it is over there. I always smile, seeing how far this little circle of listeners reaches. Now, let the hum of your fan become the wind of the desert. Let your mind float gently down the Nile. Because our story begins with something delicate, something painted on tomb walls, offered to gods, and held gently between the fingers of nobles and dreamers alike. The blue lotus flower. With its soft, graceful petals, it was more than just beautiful. It was a mood, a mystery, a secret passed down night after night. And in just a moment, I'll tell you why. Ancient Egyptians. They built pyramids taller than skyscrapers, worshipped gods with animal heads, and apparently also got higher than your last Zoom meeting turned Friday night chaos. Curious? Hang tight. Modern mixologists could never. Imagine sipping a psychedelic mojito brewed in a mug shaped like a dwarf god with lion ears and a demon face. Yeah, the ancient Egyptians were mixing cocktails that hit harder than your worst Tinder date. In 2024, archaeologists studying a set of clay mugs shaped like Bes, an Egyptian dwarf deity of protection, fertility, sex, and good vibes, made a wild discovery. These weren't just quirky drinkware. They were ritual chalices for dream-inducing, fertility-boosting, full sensory cocktails that would put a Bisa to shame. Lab analysis of the mug residue found a witchy brew of honey, pine nuts, sesame, grapes, licorice, and alcohol, mixed with psychoactive plant compounds. Yes, this wasn't just some spiced wine for nobles. It was a sacred, hallucination-inducing potion. Imagine drinking a smoothie and waking up thinking you're Ra himself. Now let's talk about the shape of the mug, because that matters. Bes was no ordinary god. He was the ancient Egyptian version of your protective drunk uncle at a family barbecue. Small, loud, wild-haired, but deeply respected. Egyptians believed bees could scare away evil spirits, enhance fertility, and maybe, just maybe, guide your spirit through a metaphysical rave in the astral plane. And here's where it gets wild. Some researchers found human proteins in the residue, suggesting that bodily fluids like breast milk, mucus, or blood may have been added to the brew, for ritual reasons, not as a garnish. Yes, drink that in. These Bes mugs were found near Saqqara, the vast burial grounds close to the pyramids of Giza, which means elite Egyptians were getting spiritually sloshed not just for fun, but during divine rituals of fertility and dream visions, possibly even to commune with gods or receive prophetic messages. This wasn't a one-off Saturday night. This was an organized, temple-sanctioned, multi-sensory experience, combining pharmacology, theology, and maybe a splash of personal fluids. Because why not? While today's parties come with Red Bull and regret, ancient Egypt served up mind-bending elixirs in God-shaped mugs, designed to unlock cosmic awareness, boost fertility, and maybe even hit you with a God-approved hangover. But if you think that was intense, imagine a full-scale religious festival where the goal was to get so hammered the gods would notice. Isn't just wild, it's divinely trashed. Holy drunkenness, when getting wasted was worship. Let's get one thing straight. Ancient Egyptians didn't just drink wine. They weaponized it, and not for partying, but to literally black out until the gods showed up. You ever go to a party that feels so out of body, it's basically religious? Well, the ancient Egyptians did that, on purpose. And they even had a name for it. The Feast of Drunkenness. Sounds like a college frat prank. Think again. This was an official state-sponsored holy day, hosted at temples, backed by priests, blessed by pharaohs, and dedicated to the goddess Hathor, aka Egypt's queen of music, love, beauty, and yes, booze-fueled divine ecstasy. Here's how it worked. First, worshippers would fast for days. No food, no drink, no distractions. Why? To lower their physical resistance to alcohol. Because when the wine finally flowed, they wanted every drop to hit like a spiritual lightning bolt. This wasn't sipping rose under a pyramid. This was conscious chemical surrender, a total body shutdown so the soul could wake up. During the actual festival, held at dawn and often repeated at night, wine was served in massive quantities. The priests played music, drums pounded, dancers moved in trance, and people drank until they collapsed, unconscious, believing their spirits would rise to meet the gods while their bodies temporarily checked out. And here's the wildest part. They weren't just hoping for a good time. They were reenacting a myth. According to one legend, humanity once ticked off the gods so badly that Hathor, in her rage form, Sekhmet, started annihilating the population. To stop the bloodbath, Ra tricked her by spilling beer dyed red to look like blood. She drank it, got absolutely blitzed, passed out, and woke up the next day as Hathor again, the gentle, nurturing goddess of love. So the Feast of Drunkenness. It was a full-blown, choreographed ritual blackout, meant to channel that divine story, pacify the gods, and invite their presence through altered states of consciousness. Forget wine tastings. This was spiritual sloshing at a cosmic level. And guess who attended? Not just villagers. We're talking high priests, noble women, elite society, maybe even pharaohs. The Temple of Dendera, the heart of Hathor worship, held some of the most elaborate wine-soaked trance ceremonies in the ancient world. And the inscriptions say it all. She who dances, she who drinks, she who awakens. No wonder modern historians call this a form of shamanic communion, a way to enter trance, lose the ego, and become a vessel for divine power. It's like mixing Burning Man with the Vatican and pouring wine over the whole thing. If today's festivals are about Coachella selfies and overpriced sangria, the Egyptians were staging literal blackout baptisms, where getting lit meant possibly waking up with a divine message, or at least a priest shaking you back to life with a date cake. Still think the ancient world was boring? Not even close. Because if wine could take you to heaven, imagine what happened when they threw flowers into the mix. Let's just say it bloomed with euphoria. Blue Lotus, the flower that made Egypt float. You've heard of herbal tea that helps you sleep. But what if I told you ancient Egyptians had a flower that could make you see visions, feel euphoria, and maybe flirt with a god or two along the way? Say hello to the blue lotus, or as some modern researchers like to call it, the original chill pill of the Nile. Scientifically known as Nymphaea cerulea, this vibrant electric blue water lily wasn't just a pretty pond plant floating in sacred temple pools. No, sir. It was the VIP guest at Egypt's most exclusive spiritual and social parties. Here's the lowdown. Ancient Egyptians soaked it in wine, steeped it into teas, or sometimes just sniffed it like an ancient essential oil diffuser with attitude. The goal? Not just relaxation, but mild psychoactive effects. Reports from residue analysis and historical texts suggest it could cause a sense of calm euphoria, lightheadedness, and enhanced dream states. Basically, it didn't knock you out, it made you float. And its symbolism? It's everywhere. The blue lotus was depicted in tomb paintings, temple carvings, even held in the hands of pharaohs and gods. Why? Because this wasn't just a flower, it was a cosmic metaphor. Think about it. The blue lotus blooms every morning from the dark waters of the Nile, unfolds with the rising sun, and closes again at dusk. The Egyptians saw this as the plant version of resurrection and rebirth. A floral mic drop from nature herself. But here's where it gets even more trippy. The lotus was deeply associated with Hathor, goddess of love, joy, and intoxication, and sometimes with Ra, the sun god. It was used in rituals meant to open the heart, enhance vision quests, and connect with the divine through dreams. Some modern psychoactive researchers have compared its mild effects to a natural sedative, something like taking a microdose of ecstasy if it were flower-powered and God-approved. And don't just take my word for it. Archaeologists have found blue lotus petals in burial sites, wrapped into mummy cloths, stuffed in jars next to wine, and painted lovingly into every corner of sacred texts. Basically, if ancient Egyptians had an Instagram, their profile pic would have had a blue lotus filter. In the tomb of Tutankhamun, blue lotus flowers were laid across his body, suggesting that even in death, the boy king was expected to rise again, like the lotus, tranquil, radiant, and maybe just a little high. Today's wellness influencers sell calming teas and essential oils. Ancient Egyptians? They were soaking lotus petals in fermented wine and whispering prayers to the goddess Hathor while possibly tripping through sacred dreams. In short, the blue lotus was part drug, part deity, and all vibes. But hold up, you think sipping flowers is wild? Just wait until the priests start mixing herbs that make you see things. Brews up a cocktail that would have made your local pharmacist faint. Herbal hallucinations, when Egypt's potions got extra. You thought Egypt's idea of happy hour ended with wine and flowers? Nope, that was the pregame. Because when it came to altering reality, the ancient priests brewed cocktails so potent, they'd make your local shaman say, "Okay, slow down, Pharaoh. Let's talk potions." Real, alchemical, sacred, brain-melting brews. Because the ancient Egyptians weren't just sipping on fruity wines and floating lotus petals, they were crafting complex herbal elixirs that combined ritual, chemistry, and a whole lot of altered consciousness. At the center of this cauldron of mystery is a little-known ingredient with a big reputation, Peganum harmala, also called Syrian rue. Now, Syrian rue isn't just your average weed growing by the riverbank. It contains harmaline and harmine, naturally occurring MAO inhibitors, the very same chemical class used to activate the psychoactive effects of DMT in modern ayahuasca rituals. Translation: Syrian rue doesn't get you high by itself, but it unlocks the effects of other powerful plants, like some kind of ancient mind hack key. Combine it with the right partner compound, and boom, visions, spiritual awakening, soul voyages through the cosmic Nile. And that's exactly what researchers think the Egyptians were doing. When scientists analyzed the residue inside one of those creepy cool BE's mugs, you know, the dwarf lion-faced god of fertility and party protection, they found traces of Peganum harmala, along with fermented grapes, alcohol, pine nuts, honey, sesame, licorice, and more. A recipe straight out of some divine apothecary's secret scroll. But this wasn't some amateur mix. This was intentional alchemy, a designed fusion of stimulants, relaxants, MAOIs, and sweeteners. Imagine mixing a mulled wine, an energy booster, a spiritual enhancer, and an invitation to the underworld, all in one goblet. Now, let's get real. Did they know about MAOIs and alkaloid interaction in molecular terms? No. But based on ritual use, repetition across temples, and consistent ingredients found across different dig sites, it's clear they knew what these plants did, and they were using them with precision and purpose. The purpose? These weren't Friday night party drinks. These were sacraments. Consumed in sacred chambers, often carved beneath temples or hidden near shrines, these potions were believed to induce visions of gods, ancestors, or prophetic dreams, aid in fertility rituals, helping women connect with divine energies before childbirth, serve as a healing tonic for physical or spiritual illness, or provide access to altered states where one could commune with gods or unlock hidden wisdom. In fact, the entire ritual experience was often built around these brews. From the lighting of incense to chanting hymns to rhythmic dancing and percussion, the setting created the perfect sensory storm to launch the drinker into a different dimension. In the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, some texts reference priests entering states of divine ecstasy, guided by plant medicines, music, and isolation chambers. Think sound bath meets psychedelic vision quest, curated by a guy in leopard skin with eyeliner sharper than your Wi-Fi signal. Today's trend is plant-based everything. Ancient Egypt. They were plant-based, astral projected, emotionally rebirthed, and probably floating 3 chakras off the ground. And one more twist. Some scholars even believe these potions may have involved mystery ingredients now lost to history, sacred flora no longer growing in Egypt's modern climate, or known only to temple priests who kept the recipes deliberately hidden. Because when your goal is cosmic consciousness, you don't leave the potion notes lying around like grandma's soup recipe. You guard that knowledge like the gods gave it to you directly. Still with me? Good. Because drinking Syrian rue in a dwarf god mug is one thing. But now, imagine using that altered state to literally enter your dreams, summon the gods, and rewrite your destiny. Buckle up. Next up is where dreams turn deadly serious. Divine dreams when sleeping was a sacred superpower. Today, dreams are just weird replays of your phone addiction and unpaid bills. But in ancient Egypt, dreams were a direct line to the gods, like a cosmic Zoom call. But you had to drink a psychotropic cocktail and pass out in a temple first. The ancient Egyptians didn't sleep just to rest. They slept to receive messages, heal their bodies, solve problems, and even receive instructions for the future. And they believed that dreams weren't just personal hallucinations, They were actual crossovers into the divine realm. This practice had a name: dream incubation. And it wasn't something that happened by accident after a heavy BE's mug cocktail. It was deliberate, orchestrated, and sometimes funded by the state. Here's how it worked. A person would approach a sacred site, like a temple of Hathor, Thoth, Serapis, or Imhotep, Egypt's OG doctor god. They'd cleanse themselves, fast, abstain from sex, purify with water and incense. Then they'd enter a special sleep chamber, isolated, dark, sometimes underground. There, after drinking a ritual mixture, often containing herbs like blue lotus, opium poppy, or Syrian rue, they would lie down on sacred bedding, sometimes even on top of inscriptions or beneath carvings meant to guide the dream. The goal: to dream a vision and wake up with an answer, a healing, or a direct message from a god. Imagine going to bed, not hoping to rest, but expecting Ra or Hathor to slide into your subconscious like, "Hey, here's the plan for next week." Evidence detail. Texts found at Dendera, Saqqara, and Thebes describe this process vividly. In one hymn to Hathor, the priest praises her ability to arrive in dreams, bathed in light and drunkenness, to speak the secrets of rebirth. In other accounts, dreams are described as gateways to the field of reeds, the Egyptian version of paradise. And they didn't take these dreams lightly. If you saw a falcon in your dream, it might mean divine favor. If you dreamed of crocodiles, it might mean enemies are near. And if you dreamed of a god appearing to you directly, you were either being warned or chosen. Entire temple sections were built for this purpose. The Temple of Serapis in Alexandria, later adopted by Greeks and Romans, became a hotspot for healing dreams. Patients would come from all over Egypt to sleep, dream, and hopefully wake up cured. And the dreamers weren't always random peasants. Priests, nobles, royal women, and warriors used dream rituals to ask for signs before war, interpret the future of pregnancies, learn who to trust or who would betray them, or even receive designs for temples and sacred texts. Mythic example, bonus layer. Remember how in earlier myths, Hathor was calmed after a bloody rampage with a divine drugged drink? That's the waking ritual. But once in dream space, she reappears in a different form. Soft, glowing, musical, and seductive. The dream bringer, not the destroyer. So in a way, the gods had two faces, one for the daylight world and another for the dream. Witty analogy. Today's dream dictionaries tell you what it means if you're flying or naked in public. Ancient Egyptians. They wrote hymns, built temples, fasted for days, and consulted dream priests, because to them, your dreams weren't random. They were a voicemail from the afterlife. Hidden detail. Some scholars believe that the hallucinogenic cocktails taken before sleep were not just to knock you out, but to prime the mind for vivid, symbolic, high-resolution dreaming. Think of it like installing a divine plug-in. The ritual substances expanded the subconscious, making it more receptive to divine frequencies. And the dreamers weren't just lying down on stone floors, oh no. They were surrounded by chanting, incense, glyphs of protection, sacred geometry, and sometimes even slept near statues believed to house the spirit of the god themselves. That's right, they were dreaming next to the deity. Now, if you think dreaming in a temple after drinking a psychoactive potion is intense, wait until you find out what else they were adding to those sacred brews. Spoiler, it's biological, and it's not for the squeamish. Get ready, Next up, gonna shake your stomach and your soul. Body fluids, the divine brew. A cocktail only the gods could love. Modern cocktails come with citrus zest or a sugared rim. Ancient Egyptian cocktails. Try breast milk, mucus, or blood shaken, not stirred with a twist of sacred ritual. Yeah, suddenly that pineapple daiquiri doesn't sound so exotic. Let's set the scene. You're in a dim, incense-soaked temple chamber near Saqqara. A priest is chanting. A woman sits on a ritual stool, eyes closed, clutching a ceramic mug shaped like the god Bees, that wild dwarf deity with lion ears and a permanent party face. The mug is filled with a sacred elixir: honey, grape wine, pine nuts, herbs, maybe even Syrian rue or blue lotus. But then, things get unconventional. Because modern researchers, using protein analysis on residue from these ancient mugs, found traces of human bodily fluids. Yes, human proteins. Not from accidental contamination, but from intentional ritual use. We're talking about fluids like breast milk, symbolic of nourishment, motherhood, rebirth; blood often tied to sacrifice, divine power, or fertility; mucus or saliva possibly used in symbolic life essence transmissions. You read that right. These ingredients were added on purpose to supercharge the ritual drink with human life force. But why? To understand that, you need to understand the Egyptian concept of Heka, not just magic in the Harry Potter sense, but a divine energy that existed in all things: words, symbols, and especially bodily fluids. To the Egyptians, fluids weren't just gross biological leftovers. They were sacred carriers of soul energy conduits between the body and the divine. So when they added breast milk to a fertility drink, it wasn't just symbolic, it was alchemical, a literal merging of human and divine properties. A way to infuse the ritual potion with life essence from a fertile woman, making the brew more powerful in spiritual terms. And blood, that was the big one. Blood was considered life itself. Many Egyptian healing rituals involved smearing blood on statues or tools. In some high-level rites, it may have been mixed with wine or beer and consumed as part of a myth reenactment, like the tale of Sekhmet and the red beer, where the gods disguised alcohol as blood to calm her divine rage. So when a priest or ritual participant added blood to a drink, they were likely trying to invoke that mythic moment, bringing the story to life by literally consuming its elements. Gross? Yes. But spiritually profound? Also yes. And this wasn't just bodily fluid for shock value. It was deeply controlled, purposeful, symbolic. Think of it like religious sacraments in other cultures. Wine becomes blood, bread becomes body. In Egypt, they skipped the metaphor and just went literal. And remember, these rituals were often focused on fertility, birth, or transformation. So fluids like breast milk were actually celebrated, not hidden. A woman's ability to nourish life was divine. Including it in a sacred brew was like adding the ultimate blessing, the raw, nurturing power of motherhood itself. Witty analogy. Today we brag about organic ingredients. Ancient Egyptians? Their brews were so organic, they could share DNA with you. What did it taste like? Let's not even guess. But it likely had sweet notes from wine, honey, and herbs, masking some of the funkier ingredients. That said, taste wasn't the point. These weren't made for sipping and savoring. They were power potions meant to induce dreams, summon gods, or help women receive visions of their future children. There is even speculation that some of these fluids were donated by temple priestesses, women specially trained to act as channels for divine energy. Their bodily essence was considered potent, clean, and spiritually active. It's like taking communion from someone who literally embodied a goddess. Still with me? Because if you thought the drink was intense, wait until you see how they performed it. Ritual drinking in ancient Egypt wasn't just a sip and sit down. It was full theater divine ecstasy with choreography. Up next is where things get loud, wild, and surprisingly sacred. When getting drunk was a sacred performance. Today, getting tipsy might lead to bad karaoke or awkward dance moves. In ancient Egypt, it could mean embodying a goddess, dancing on temple floors, and achieving transcendence in full view of your spiritual audience. To the untrained eye, what happened inside Egyptian temples during sacred festivals may have looked like parties, loud music, flowing wine, dancers swaying under oil lamp light, people in states of euphoria, possibly even collapse. But make no mistake, this was no rave. This was ritualized theater of the divine, a sacred reenactment, a performance designed to merge heaven and earth. And the headliner of this cosmic stage, Hathor, goddess of music, goddess of fertility, goddess of love, beauty, joy, and most relevant to us, goddess of sacred intoxication. She was the original divine showrunner, and her worshippers didn't just pray to her, they became her. The set, the temple stage. Within her temples, especially at Dendera, entire sections were devoted to musical performance, ecstatic dance, and intoxicated ritual. Musicians, often women, played sistrums, rattles, and harps, while priestesses, sometimes barefoot and adorned in flowing linen, danced in synchronized, trance-like movements. These weren't improvised TikTok reels. These were choreographed rituals with symbolic steps, sacred gestures, and layers of meaning, each motion invoking protection, pleasure, transformation. This divine performance had multiple purposes. To channel Hathor's presence into the space, to induce a group trance state among participants, to reenact cosmic myths, where Hathor restored balance through music, love, and intoxication, and to allow participants, especially women, to momentarily embody the goddess herself. The drunken ritual of becoming. Remember the myth where Hathor, as her rage form, Sekhmet, nearly destroyed humanity. The gods tricked her by giving her drugged red beer to drink. She passed out, woke up transformed back into loving Hathor. That myth wasn't just bedtime storytelling, it was acted out. Participants drank red-dyed beer or wine, danced until they reached ecstatic states, and even staged the fainting moment, collapsing in the temple courtyard as the myth dictated. Waking up from this sacred drunkenness was symbolic rebirth. You didn't just get tipsy, you got transformed. Audience participation? Absolutely. You didn't have to be a priestess or a dancer to join. Regular folks, especially women, would attend festivals like the Feast of Drunkenness, fast beforehand, and then drink themselves into a sacred stupor, hoping to receive dreams, visions, or blessings from Hathor herself. The collective goal? To blur the line between the human and the divine, and to do it through music, movement, and intoxication. Ritual roles performers. Priestesses weren't just dancers, they were trained performers with theological importance. Often called chantresses of Hathor or divine adorers, they led these ceremonies as both entertainers and divine vessels. Their movements were spells. Their voices were invocations. Their presence turned the temple into a living myth, with every gesture, pulling the gods closer. Witty analogy. If a Broadway play, a spiritual retreat, and a Dionysian wine orgy had a baby, it would still only aspire to be what ancient Egypt called divine ritual intoxication. Psychological layer. Modern scholars suggest this kind of ritual served not just spiritual goals, but emotional and communal ones too. It helped communities release collective stress, mourn losses, celebrate harvests or victories, bond in shared ecstatic experiences, and temporarily dissolve social hierarchies in favor of divine unity. When you're lying beside a noble, both wine-sloshed and dreaming of Hathor, titles don't matter. The only thing that matters is connection to the divine. Sometimes, the ceremonies concluded with a reawakening ritual, where participants were gently revived with perfumes, chanting, or even cool water poured over their hands and faces, symbolizing resurrection, clarity, and spiritual cleansing. You'd gone into the dark with the goddess, and you'd emerged, changed. Now imagine you're a young woman trying to conceive, unsure of your future, and someone tells you, drink this, lie down in a sacred chamber, and dream your baby into being. Sounds crazy, not in ancient Egypt, because up next is where mysticism meets motherhood. Fertility temples, the BE's chambers, where women dreamed babies into existence. Forget IVF, ovulation tracking apps, and hormone charts. In ancient Egypt, if you were trying to get pregnant, your best bet was to trip out in a sacred chamber, drink a divine cocktail, and hope a god gave you a vision of your future child. Let's talk about motherhood in ancient Egypt, and how when fertility wasn't cooperating, women turned to gods, dream rituals, and psychedelic brews with a little divine intervention stirred in. Enter the BE's chambers, sacred fertility shrines located near Saqqara, the sprawling necropolis close to the pyramids of Giza. These weren't just temple side rooms or dusty chapels. These were specially designed dream chambers, carved and consecrated for one powerful purpose: to help women receive visions of pregnancy, childbirth, and destiny directly from the gods. And at the center of it all was Bees, the dwarf-like, lion-faced, bug-eyed protector deity who was anything but cute and cuddly. Who was Bees? Bees was fierce, loud, hairy, and completely dedicated to chasing away evil spirits, especially those that threatened women and children. Think of him as the ancient world's spiritual bouncer/doula, equal parts warrior and womb guardian. He was often depicted on mirrors, beds, and amulets used during childbirth, and he wasn't just symbolic. Women believed his presence in their lives and on their bodies would protect them from miscarriage, infertility, and maternal death. Now enter the chambers. These BE's fertility chambers were private sanctuaries where women could come, drink a ritual brew, and lie down to await a dream. Not just any dream, but one filled with divine insight about their womb, their child, or their spiritual readiness for motherhood. According to researchers, the women drank from best-shaped mugs, likely filled with mixtures of fermented grape wine, honey and licorice to sweeten and soothe, sesame and pine nuts, symbolizing fertility and nourishment, blue lotus and Syrian rue to relax the body and induce altered states, and possibly human breast milk or sacred blood to add a literal infusion of maternal life force. It wasn't a casual drink, it was a ritual ingestion, a contract with the divine. Drink this, open your mind, and maybe, just maybe, the gods will speak through your dreams. The goal? These dreams weren't just feel-good fantasies. They were interpreted by temple priestesses as prophetic messages, signs of whether a woman was ready to conceive, what kind of child she might have, which god or goddess was blessing or cursing her womb, or even what the soul of the unborn child desired. Sometimes these rituals were repeated over multiple nights, turning the BE's chamber into something between a holy maternity ward and a psychedelic dream spa. Did it work? Well, we don't have their pregnancy test results, but we do have inscriptions, murals, and statues showing women thanking BEs for successful births and naming their children after visions received in these rituals. In one chamber, inscriptions thank BEs and Hathor for the breath of new life in my belly, suggesting that the woman not only conceived, but credited the ritual for making it happen. It wasn't science. It was faith in the unseen, made real through performance, potion, and profound belief. Witty analogy. Today, women manifest with crystals and sage. Ancient Egyptian women, they manifested by drinking psychoactive wine next to a dwarf god statue and sleeping in a dream portal temple. And honestly, it worked for them. Cultural importance. Infertility was more than a personal frustration, it was a spiritual crisis. Having children meant continuity, legacy, and favor from the gods. So if natural attempts failed, women didn't just pray, they performed. They entered rituals, drank sacred mixtures, and dared to dream their children into existence. And these rituals weren't hidden or shameful. They were celebrated, state-supported, and deeply embedded into the theological structure of the Egyptian worldview. In some cases, women didn't just dream for themselves, they dreamt for others. Priestesses or chosen dreamers were sometimes tasked with channeling visions for queens, noblewomen, or even oracles trying to interpret the future of Egypt itself. Because in a world where God spoke through visions, the womb was more than biological, it was a gateway to the divine. Now, if this all sounds mythical, hang tight. Because next, we're diving into a ritual so legendary, they didn't just perform it, they reenacted a cosmic war between gods, using nothing but potions, myths, and a really strong buzz. Up next is the part where ritual becomes reenactment, and the divine gets theatrical. Ritual reenactment, how the Egyptians got gods drunk to save the world. Imagine this. Your civilization is on the brink of divine extinction, and the only way to stop it is to get a goddess blackout drunk. That's not fan fiction, that's official Egyptian mythology. And they didn't just tell the story, they drank it, danced it, and lived it. If you think modern storytelling is immersive with your 3D movies and VR headsets, allow me to introduce you to ancient Egyptian myth reenactment, where the ritual didn't just represent the story, it was the story. And the myth at the heart of this ritual, the legendary, terrifying, and intoxicating tale of Sekhmet and the red beer. The myth, blood, wrath, and wine. Once upon a time, in a version of reality where gods roamed the earth and humanity still had direct access to divinity, people decided to betray the gods. Big mistake. Ra, the sun god, furious at their disobedience, summoned his daughter. Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of war, vengeance, and bloodlust. She wasn't just a punisher, she was an unstoppable divine weapon. Sekhmet descended upon the earth and unleashed absolute carnage. She tore through humanity like a force of nature, her hunger insatiable, her rage boundless. And here's where it gets interesting. After a while, Ra regretted his decision. He realized Sekhmet had gone too far, humanity was about to be wiped out entirely. But here's the problem. You can't just call Sekhmet and say, "Hey girl, calm down." She was deep in her bloodlust trance. Only one thing could stop her: intoxication. So, the gods came up with a plan. They dyed massive quantities of beer red to look like blood and poured it all over the ground into the path of Sekhmet. When she arrived, thinking it was more blood from her victims, she drank it, a lot of it. She became so drunk, she passed out, and when she woke up, she wasn't Sekhmet anymore. She had transformed into her gentler, softer aspect. Hathor, the goddess of joy, love, music, and intoxicated bliss. From wrath to rebirth. From death to love. All because of one divine hangover. Now here's the wild part. This wasn't just a bedtime story. It was a ritual, a reenactment. A performance so real, participants would actually drink, dance, collapse, and resurrect, just like Hathor herself. The ritual performance, living the myth. During annual festivals, such as the Feast of Drunkenness, Egyptians led by temple priests, dancers, and musicians would drink red-dyed beer or wine, representing the myth's blood beer. Dance to exhaustion, channeling Sekhmet's ferocity. Collapse in intoxicated trance, symbolizing her transformation. Wake up in a new state, reborn as joyous devotees of Hathor. The rituals were deliberately timed for sunrise, aligning with the symbolic rebirth of light and consciousness. In some temples, like at Dendera, this ritual was engraved in the walls, and some scholars believe sleeping in the temple during these nights allowed participants to receive divine dreams. Why reenact the myth? Because for Egyptians, myth wasn't fiction. It was reality on repeat. The gods weren't just stories, they were forces that needed to be re-experienced, fed, and mirrored to keep the cosmic balance alive. To remember the myth was good. To retell the myth was sacred. But to become the myth, that was divine. Through reenactment, you didn't just honor the gods, you restored order, reminded the universe that you understood its rules, and invited the gods to once again intervene in your world. Witty analogy. It's like if every year we didn't just watch the Passion of the Christ, we acted it out, drank the blood, collapsed, and woke up believing we'd literally joined the resurrection. That's what Egypt was doing, except with more beer and lion-headed goddesses. Psychological social impact. The experience was cathartic, emotionally, spiritually, and even physically. It let people release fear and guilt through the mythic slaughter. It gave them a shared sense of relief and rebirth in Hathor's return. And it tied their personal lives to the cosmic narrative, making every drop of beer, every beat of the drum, and every moment of collapse part of something eternal. And the high? Very real. Thanks to a brew infused with herbs, honey, fermented grapes, maybe even psychoactive alkaloids, some scholars suggest participants really did lose themselves, not just metaphorically, but chemically. This wasn't fringe religion, it was state-approved spirituality. Pharaohs participated. Temples encoded the rituals in stone and scroll. And year after year, the myth was brought back to life by people willing to get a little drunk to save the universe. And while some rituals were about cosmic conflict, others were just as divine but way more medicinal. Because when you've got a hangover from reenacting a mythic bloodbath, you might want a little herbal healing. Up next is all about how Egyptians turned wine into wellness long before pharmacies existed. Medicinal wines. How ancient Egyptians turned their happy hour into healthcare. Wine has always been known for its health benefits, in moderation. But the Egyptians didn't stop at antioxidants. They said, why not toss in some herbs, resins, maybe a few sacred roots, and boom, your hangover cure just became a full-on divine prescription. Long before Walgreens, long before holistic TikTok trends and mushroom coffees, the ancient Egyptians had already figured it out. If you want medicine to work, make it taste like wine. Their approach to healing wasn't white coats and sterile pills. It was alchemical, botanical, and absolutely fermented. Enter spiked medicinal wine. These weren't just temple brews for ecstatic rituals. They were functional elixirs, brewed by healers, priest doctors, and sometimes even sacred bartenders working from recipes passed down through temple walls and sacred papyri. What was in those wines? Let's break it down. Residue analysis of clay jars found in tombs, temples, and even homes revealed wine spiked with frankincense myrrh. Not just for your Christmas story, but used for anti-inflammatory and antiseptic properties. Mandrake, a mild sedative and possible aphrodisiac. Yes, really. Juniper berries for urinary tract and digestion support. Hellebore and henbane, extremely powerful psychoactives when used in tiny, controlled doses. Pine resin, cinnamon, cumin, fenugreek, and coriander seeds, all with recognized antibacterial, antifungal, or digestive benefits. Even opium poppy extracts. In some cases, yes, the same kind later used to make morphine. That's not wine. That's liquid pharmacy. And they did just throw it all in and hope for the best. These ingredients were measured, documented, and paired for specific ailments. The process. Ancient winemaking meets apothecary science. Egyptian healers would take high-quality fermented wine, often made from red grapes or dates. Infuse it with specific herbs by soaking, boiling, or crushing the plants. Seal the mixture in clay jars and leave it to steep under the sun or in temple storerooms. Label it, yes, labels, with symbols or notes indicating who it was for and what it treated. Some of these concoctions were used for stomach issues, menstrual pain, toothaches, insomnia, fever and inflammation, enhancing fertility and libido, mental disturbances and spirit intrusions. Basically, they created an entire medical system in a bottle centuries before Hippocrates was even born. Cultural detail. These wine medicines weren't just for peasants. Pharaohs had private temple doctors. Tombs of nobles contained specially sealed jars of medicinal wine to take into the afterlife in case the gods gave them headaches too. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest known medical documents, even includes wine-based treatments for asthma, ulcers, and eye conditions. It reads like the world's first drug catalog, with a sommelier twist. Witty analogy. Today you might chase down antibiotics with orange juice. Ancient Egyptians. They chased inflammation with a spicy date wine blend laced with pine resin and a dash of dream herb. Call it Whole Foods X Pyramid Edition. Spiritual layer. And here's the part most people miss. Even medicinal wine was still sacred. Because in Egypt, healing wasn't just physical, it was energetic, symbolic, and divine. Every ingredient had a spiritual resonance. Every plant had a soul. Every drink was a form of ritual contact with the gods of healing, like Thoth, Sekhmet, or Serapis. In some temple rituals, priest-physicians would recite incantations over the wine to bless it, activate it, and guide its purpose. So when you drank that spiced, herb-laced wine, you weren't just medicating. You were aligning with divine will, Did it work? Modern analysis suggests yes. Many of the compounds they used do have real medical effects, from anti-inflammatory properties to mild analgesics. They understood the power of the plant world. And they used fermentation not just to preserve the remedy, but to activate and transport it. One of the most intriguing discoveries: a wine jar from a 3,000-year-old tomb containing trace compounds of tree resin and medicinal herbs, carefully sealed and placed next to a mummy. The inscription: "For the comfort of the journey." Because even in the afterlife, a little medicinal buzz might help with a bumpy ride. So, whether they were healing fevers, calling on gods, or escaping into dream realms, the Egyptians didn't just drink wine. They turned it into medicine, myth, and magic, one sacred sip at a time. So, ancient Egypt. The land of pyramids, pharaohs, and gods with falcon heads. Yes. But also the land where wine wasn't just wine. It was a portal to ecstasy, to healing, to divine dreams, to a higher state of being, sometimes literally. From dwarf-faced mugs with psychoactive potions, to festivals where getting blackout drunk was considered a holy act, from women dreaming their unborn children into existence, to temple pharmacists blending wine with sacred herbs that still baffle scientists today. Let's face it, the ancient Egyptians weren't just building pyramids. They were engineering consciousness. With plants, dreams, rituals, and courage, most of us reserved for Burning Man. They didn't just believe in the gods. They drank with them, danced with them, slept beside them, became them. And somewhere in the flicker of oil lamps, the rhythm of sistrums, and the sacred taste of honeyed wine, they cracked open a reality where magic, medicine, and the divine all lived in a single sip. If you just went, "Whoa, I had no idea Egypt was this wild," then you, my friend, are exactly who we made this for. So go ahead, tap that like button if this blew your mind. Subscribe to Gaian Bedtime Stories for more bold, cinematic deep dives into ancient secrets and hidden truths that rewrite everything you thought you knew. And hit the bell, because history doesn't repeat. It resurfaces. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay sharp, stay curious, and keep asking, what else have they hidden in plain sight?